Hello, I'm Deception and I want to make a little video on the TFNation minicon that happened in Reading this weekend. So it was held in the Great Hall at the University of Reading, and although the weather outside was extremely wet and extremely cold, that didn't stop many Transformers fans from gathering for a day of panels, toy buying and general socialising. So I arrived at the Great Hall at 9:30 and already the toy buying was well underway. The stalls were extremely busy, people were catching up with each other, and the opening ceremonies had just begun. So the first thing I did was to look around and get my bearings. So the way the hall was structured, we had a panel area at the front with audience seating and a video screen and a stage, and then at the back was all the dealers, where there were the toy vendors around the outside, and in the middle were the artists, including the comic artists and the fan forge area. So I went to have a look at the various dealers first of all to see what toys were on offer and see if there's anything I wanted. I had to be quite patient to wait to dig through some of the buckets of loose Transformers because I don't worry too much about box Transformers, so the loose ones can often be a source of some bargains. I looked at Toy-Fu, which has a really good range of reasonably priced toys, but I didn't find anything I wanted there. However, I did find a well-priced Legacy Gears on another of the stands, and that was on my list of things to pick up for my mini bot collection. So within half an hour, I'd already got my first Transformer of the day. I went to In Demand Toys, who had a stand, and I had my eye on Star Convoy, which they had for £100, which was the cheapest I've seen it. But I ummed and ahed and thought about how would I get a Transformer that large on the train home, and turned around, and by the time I turned around back to the store, it had already been sold. So clearly that was a popular purchase of the day. There were lots of really good toys to be had and some bargains as well. I noticed some of the stands were a little bit cheaper than I've seen at other events, so the TFNation is definitely one for the discerning Transformers customer. So the panel started with a tribute to David Wise, and this was a really interesting panel that I'd known the name and I'd known that he'd written quite a few things I like, but I had no idea quite how much of an impact he'd had on the pop culture that I enjoy. So that was a really, really interesting panel. I learnt a lot, and it was probably the best one of the day in terms of the sound, because unfortunately there were lots of technical issues, but that one I could hear fine throughout the hall, so that was really good. More panels followed. We had an Energon panel all about the Dreamwave Energon comics, and TFNation, in conjunction with Simon Furman and the others who worked on the comics, have recreated 2 issues of Energon, so that's really exciting. And then throughout the day there were more panels. I watched a panel with Ed Peary and John Paul Bovey talking about their work on the Ninja Turtles, and I watched some of Nick Roche's panel on designing characters for Earthspark. I would have liked to have seen more of that, but I just was so busy for time, and the sound wasn't brilliant by that stage. The microphones were starting to give out, so I only saw a small bit of that panel. So after exploring the hall and seeing a couple of panels, it was lunchtime. I went out in the pouring rain because I needed to get some money, and found this funnily appropriate little fish and chip shop, which made me smile. So when I got back to the convention venue, I went to have some lunch at the Dairy, which was the student food and drink venue attached to the Great Hall. I met up with the guys from Transformers the Show, and we had a pint of beer and shared our purchases and had a really, really good time. Then after lunch, it was back to the convention hall for some more panels, some more wheeling dealing, and I got to talk to some people I'd been wanting to speak to for a while. I spoke to Sixo about Japanese Transformers, I spoke to Graham Thompson about Marvel UK and the TF UK guide, and I spoke to Simon Furman about the Energon comics, which I was really excited about. So it was a good day catching up with some of the more notable names of Transformers fandom, as well as meeting people who I've never really chatted to before. But the great thing about a convention like that is you've always got a topic in common. There's always something to talk about. And then at the end of the day, Simon Furman did a panel on the early days of Marvel UK, but unfortunately the sound was so bad at that point that you couldn't really hear anything, so I gave up on that one. But I would have really enjoyed it, and I really hope that if Simon Furman is at the TFNation next August in Birmingham, that they redo that panel with a decent sound system, because it seemed like one that really deserves to get a wider audience. So in terms of what I picked up at the convention, I got the aforementioned Legacy Gears, I managed to get a cheap Skullgrin, and then I had a lovely art print from David Cousins another art print from Ed Peary, and I got a set of stickers as well. So, oh yes, and a copy of the Britformers comic issue 1. And I really enjoyed chatting to all the artists and creators in the Forge area. I love comics creation. I'd love to do more of it myself, and so it was really interesting talking to them and learning about their techniques and their approach. And they were very kind with their time. So I highly recommend that side of things. If you're into more of the comics than the toys, there's certainly plenty for you to do at TFNation as well. So once the convention started to die down, I went back to the dairy for an evening of drinks and socialising, and that was really fun. We had tables with people building blockies, there were new Transformers. David from TFNation had 86 Soundwave and 86 Windcharger, so we were able to have a look at those, which was really exciting. And generally, it was just such a good atmosphere of people really enjoying their purchases, enjoying the world of the giant robots, and it couldn't have been a nicer bunch of people to spend a Saturday evening with. So with that, the convention came to the end, and it was a really, really good day. I have not been to the larger event in Birmingham in the summer, but I will be going next year. And this Minicon was a perfect smaller step to give a taster of what's in store for that. So if anybody hasn't been, I definitely recommend it. There's one coming up in Manchester in March, and it really is a great place to buy Transformers, to meet other Transformers fans, and to just really, really have a good time with other people who do not judge or mind this crazy hobby of ours. So thanks to TFNation for putting on the event. It was really, really fun. They did a great job, and I'm really looking forward to Manchester.